back again, once again, to Quick Trivia with Mike. I'm your host, Mike Brever, and this is taking place right here at East Castle Place in Lindsay Hall. You know, an interesting thing that I found out recently from my cameraman, Scott McFerrin here, is that these programs, in order to get on 955, actually get uploaded to YouTube and then onto 955. I've actually shared that information with many people, and I know family members of mine are watching the show. So I'd like to reach out to my brother in Virginia, my sister in New Jersey, and my sister in Waukesha. Hi, thanks for playing along. However, you can't win the wine. Only residents of East Castle Place can win that wine. You know, we've started a new format here at Quick Trivia with Mike, and it is the bumper music. Last week we went with a music that hopefully you recognized. Maybe you didn't, I'm not sure. We have another new piece today. The interesting thing about this music is that it plays a vital role in Quick Trivia with Mike. It serves as the tiebreaker. If we have multiple people calling in and have either all 3 questions right, or the most right is 2 questions, or the most right is 1, if you can name the music that we have as the bumper music leading into the show, you will win, because identifying the music is the tiebreaker now. A brand new thing we're doing here at Quick Trivia with Mike. I hope you're going to enjoy it. We're having a lot of fun with it. Last week's music, by the way, if you didn't realize it, the tiebreaker for multiple questions correct was identifying the bumper music. It was by Vivaldi, and it was named Spring. It actually was one of my favorite pieces. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Just seemed like classic music to lead into a trivia program. So I hope you enjoyed it. The bumper music today is a new piece. Hopefully you'll be able to identify it. It serves as the tiebreaker. Now, before we get into giving you the answers to last week's questions, I must go back 2 weeks. I gave you answers to the questions last week from 2 weeks ago. One of our players, Arlene Brackensick, called in and told me that I made a mistake. I hate to admit that I made a mistake. After all, I'm the quiz master. I can just make things up if I'm wrong, and who would know? But in this case, it was pretty obvious. Arlene Brackensick called me on it, and I'm going to let you know. We talked about the art museum downtown. Many people call it the War Memorial. It actually was started with the Layton art collection many, many years ago. Well, about 30 years ago, a noted Spanish architect by the name of Santiago Calatrava came to town, and he built an extension onto the Milwaukee Art Museum. I asked you what that extension was, and I identified the answer as the Brise Soleil. Arlene Brackensick pointed out that I was wrong. If you're familiar with the architect that I'm talking about, the architecture to the art museum, you know there are wings that open up on the addition. Those wings are called the Brise Soleil, which translated from the French literally means a sunblock. So that is what the Brise Soleil was. The actual addition, which has become a banquet hall, is called the Quadracci Pavilion. So I had that wrong. My apologies. I'd like to think that I didn't really have it wrong. I worded the question wrong. So maybe that's what it really was. But Arlene caught me on it. I will tell you, however, that we pointed out last week that there was a tie. And last week we were still going by the first call in. And the Myers won. Our second caller that missed by 1 minute was the Sundbergs. Ironically, both the Myers and the Sundbergs correctly identified the addition as the Quadracci Pavilion. As a result, the winner remained the same. Each of them got all 3 questions right instead of just 2. And I do appreciate Arlene calling in and correcting me on that. I'm very pleased to find out that people are interested enough to check me on these things after the fact. That tells me people are interested and maybe they're having a good time. Now let's get right into this week's questions. I gave you 3 questions last week again, and what are the answers? You'll notice the very first one was a what am I? I've got a graphic up there. You will be intrigued to know that nobody got this right. There were guesses from night vision goggles to a Georgia O'Keeffe painting. In reality, what you are looking at is the very first functional artificial heart. It was the Jarvik artificial heart. It was first made functional in 1982. There were many prototypes before that, going all the way back to 1940. But this was the very first one. When it was originally invented by Wilhelm Johann Kolff, and of course Robert Jarvik, it was envisioned that this might actually replace the human heart. Contemporary medical procedures indicates that devices like this are really nothing more than transition devices. Contemporary medicine today will try to implant a new heart into an individual, but until a donor is identified, something like this might be used to bridge that gap, to keep a patient alive, pending the actual transplant. So the correct answer is that this was the Jarvik 7 artificial heart, first used in 1982. The second question I had for you was a little bit challenging. I'm very pleased to say, however, that one person actually got this correct. I pointed out to you that in 1894, in a sanitarium in Michigan, there was the head of the sanitarium who believed in holistic medicine. Back in those days, sanitariums were used for multiple purposes. Maybe someone had a nervous breakdown, or maybe they had anxiety. The medicines that we have available today just weren't prevalent then. And so there were places people could go for an extended rest. I asked you, what was this that this superintendent of this sanitarium invented to help calm the nerves of his patients? It actually was a very interesting thing. Remember, the key to it was that the superintendent was into holistic medicines. He was into proper diet and things like this. Another key that I did not tell you is that the sanitarium was in Battle Creek, Michigan. What was actually invented was cornflakes cereal. Cornflakes cereal was invented for medicinal purposes to calm the nerves of people living in sanitariums. It was invented by William Kellogg. William Kellogg actually sold the rights to the food, to cornflakes, to his brother John Kellogg, who went off and started Kellogg brand cereals. By 1930, Kellogg brand cereals were the largest producer of breakfast cereals in the world, and of course the staple was cornflakes. An interesting sideline to that is that the largest competitor to Kellogg brand cereals in the 1930s was Post brand cereals. An interesting sideline to that is Mr. C.W. Post was actually a patient of Dr. Kellogg's at the sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan in 1894. He went off and started his own cereal brands, and by 1930 it was the second largest producer of breakfast cereals in the world. Our third question that we had for you was a little bit of a geography quiz. I pointed out to you that in the 19th century, water was the primary means of transportation for quick movement of items. It was rivers, it was lakes, it was oceans, and therefore large cities tended to be formed on the banks of rivers and oceans and Great Lakes. That has carried forward to today, and there are major population centers based around water. However, I pointed out that in the United States, there are 39 counties that have population of 1 million or more. Those 39 counties have the population driven by a major city within their boundaries. There are, however, 5 counties that have population of over 1 million, and they are not located on a Great Lake, on the Gulf of Mexico, or on the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean. And I asked you not to name the counties, but to name the cities that drive the population. Again, these reside in states that are not located on an ocean, a gulf, or a Great Lake. And I asked you to name the cities within those counties that drive the population to 1 million. Now, I should tell you, one of our avid watchers called me and told me that there are not 39 counties of a population over 1 million. There's actually closer to 49. I stand corrected. But there still are only 5, and even this was a bit of a stretch. 10 years ago there were 5. Today there's really only 4, but the 5th is still 996,000, so I thought that was pretty close. The answers, of course, were Phoenix, Arizona, Las Vegas, Nevada, Salt Lake City, Utah, Tucson, Arizona, and St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis is the one that only has population of 996,000. As you all know, I used to work at a television station. I worked at Milwaukee PBS. I happen to know, because of my time there, that St. Louis is exactly one major viewing market larger than Milwaukee. Our population is about 996,000 in the Milwaukee area. St. Louis, again, is 996,000. So those were your answers. It was, in fact, the Jarvik Artificial Heart. It was cornflakes, and those were the 5 municipalities. We had several people call in. We had only one, however, that got 2 of the questions correct, and so a tiebreaker wasn't even needed. The Sundbergs, again, are the big winners, and they win the bottle of Vouvray. It is 2017 vintage. It is French Domaine du Clos d'Amont. It actually was donated by last week's winners, the Myers. And what a wonderful tradition. I drop off a bottle of wine to the winners, and they don't donate one back. Maybe that'll continue, maybe it won't. We'll see. Now it's time to move on to this week's questions. But before we do, we're going to take a brief pause for station identification. This is ECTV Channel 955, bringing you the best in East Castle Place entertainment. Now let's head on to our questions for this coming week. Again, get in your answers by Monday at noon. You can call me at 963-8425. You can email me at mbrever@eastcastleplace.com, or you can put a guess in my mailbox behind the receptionist desk. So any one of those is your way to get into me. I have a bit of a history question to begin with today. First of all, there was an era in English history that was known as the Hanoverian era. There were 4 Georges in a row during the Hanoverian era, during the era of the 1700s, the 18th century actually, going to about 1840. George I, George II, George III, and George IV. An interesting thing about the Hanoverian era is that George I, King of England, didn't speak a single word of English. As you can gather by the fact that they were called the Hanoverian kings, there was intermarriage between the British royal family and the German royal family. And at that time, King George I only spoke German. His son, King George II, only spoke broken English. King George III actually was the first of the Hanoverian kings who had English as his primary language. The Hanoverian era is noted for one other thing, however. A couple of weeks ago, if you tune into our Saturday afternoon Masses, you know we started a tradition with those, ending the Masses with some music. On Easter Sunday, we ended with a piece from Handel. Handel's piece, The Messiah, debuted in Dublin back in the 1700s. It had its premiere in London during the era of King George II. King George II actually attended the premiere performance, and he added something to Handel's Messiah that everybody does to this day. How did King George II enhance the viewing pleasure for everybody to Handel's Messiah? That is question number 1 today. A couple of weeks ago, we delved into television history for question number 2. We told you that in 1941, in July of 1941, a brand new thing happened in television history. It was the very first commercial. Bulova Watches placed a commercial in the middle of a Brooklyn Dodgers game. The cost of producing and placing that commercial was $9. I'll bet advertising executives would love to have prices like that today. TV took off very, very fast after that. In 1953, Milwaukee actually had its first television station, WTMJ. WTMJ was an NBC affiliate at that time, the National Broadcasting Company. I think it's National Broadcasting Corporation today, actually. Interesting thing is that many television stations have call letters that stand for something. I'm sure you all know that WTMJ actually stands for, and think of this for a minute, TMJ, the Milwaukee Journal. In the mid-50s and 60s and 70s, the Milwaukee Journal was a marketing and media giant in the Milwaukee area. They owned 2 newspapers, the Journal and the Sentinel. They had an FM radio station, they had an AM radio station, they had a television station. Again, though, their call letters stood for something. That's not necessarily common with all television stations, but with many it is. In the PBS era, for example, PBS used to be known as NET. NET stood for National Educational Television. The New York affiliate for PBS is known as WNET. It used to be the flagship station. Now, of course, PBS stands for Public Broadcasting Service. There's at least 2 other television stations in the Milwaukee area that has call letters that stand for something. What do those call letters stand for? They are WMVS and WMVT. What do the call letters WMVS and WMVT stand for? That is question number 2. I will tell you, by the way, for those of you that are interested, WMVS began broadcasting in 1957. WMVT began broadcasting in 1963. Our third question today, again, delves a little bit into television history. There is a program that appeared for the first time on HBO in 2015. It has produced 4,500 episodes and is still in production today. It has produced 35 television specials. In 2013, it was ranked number 30 by TV Guide on the list of the 60 best television shows in America. To date, it has won 190 Emmys. It has been nominated for an additional 147 Emmys. And it premiered on HBO in 2015. What is that television show? So those are your 3 questions today. The call letters of the television stations, what show appeared on HBO for the first time in 2015 and won all the accolades, and of course the other question that we had for you was, what did King George II add to the Messiah? Call in with your answers to those questions. Again, get your answers into me. I'm Mike Brever, your host for Quick Trivia with Mike. On behalf of the president of ACTV, Tyler Gudex, and we have our, let's see, what are all the titles? Laura Wangler, our director of production. Scott McFerrin, it says here that he's actually my executive producer, but he is the producer of Quick Trivia with Mike, and he's my camera crew, so he plays a multi-task role here. And Cooper Ledvina is our creative director. On behalf of all of us, once again, I'm Mike Brever. This has been Quick Trivia with Mike. Until next week, I ask you to stay safe, stay smart, and be patient. We'll all be back together again very soon, enjoying that famous East Castle Place hospitality. Until next time, so long.